When we think of conditions like severe depression, OCD, or addiction, we usually picture a mind spinning out of control. We imagine a swirling vortex of thoughts, where everything is erratic, disordered, and unpredictable. But a neuroscientific framework proposed by researcher Robin Carhart-Harris suggests our intuition about these states might be wrong. It's called the entropic brain hypothesis, and it offers a counterintuitive look at what is actually happening during these periods of intense suffering. Carhart-Harris proposes that instead of a breakdown into disorder, these conditions represent a mind locked into an extreme degree of internal order. In physics, entropy is a measure of how unpredictable a system is. Under this clinical framework, a deeply depressed mind is severely low entropy, running almost entirely on rigid, highly predictable, and repetitive loops of rumination. These recurring thoughts wear deep, narrow grooves into your consciousness. Heavy negative assumptions, like the belief that you are worthless, become so heavily weighted that they act like steep valleys, trapping your thoughts at the bottom. Looking at these MRI cross-sections of a human brain, we can observe distinct structural networks. In a low entropy state, these networks become too strictly compartmentalized, preventing the brain from accessing the fluid communication needed to form new perspectives. If a depressed brain is suffocating under its own unyielding order, a specific clinical question emerges. How do you introduce exactly enough chaos to break the system out of its rut? To answer that, we have to look at how consciousness operates. There is a state known in physics as criticality. It is the precise knife-edge transition zone right between rigid order and total chaos, the point where a system is the most poised and sensitive. This visualizes the spectrum of consciousness. A healthy waking mind doesn't sit on the glowing edge. It rests securely below it, in a subcritical state. Staying within this boundary maintains a stable self and reliable reality testing, keeping our metacognition intact by restricting extreme mental movement. Everyday survival depends on this constraint. To function in the world, our normal waking consciousness is designed to be slightly rigid. This brings us to compounds like psilocybin and LSD. Within this scientific framework, psychedelics act as a specific mechanical catalyst that explicitly turns the brain's entropy dial up. The brain is forced out of its well-ordered subcritical zone and driven upward into the high-entropy critical edge. Researchers call this REBUS, relaxed beliefs under psychedelics. At this edge, separated networks cross-communicate, and the rigid constraints that form our ego soften. Those top-down beliefs from earlier, the unyielding assumptions driving depression and addiction, lose their grip. For a few hours, the mind's most stubborn thoughts become revisable. By creating a temporary, chemically induced spike in disorder, the medicine bypasses the brain's rigid defenses, opening a brief window where real therapeutic change can take root. Dr. Carhart-Harris often uses a specific metaphor to describe this disruption. If a depressed mind is a rugged landscape of deep, inescapable valleys, raising entropy is like briefly heating that landscape and melting it flat, or shaking up a snow globe. In this smooth, high-entropy environment, the trapped ball of a patient's repetitive thought pattern is dislodged. It is finally free to roll in entirely new directions. However, more entropy isn't infinitely better. Pushing the dial too far past that critical edge results in severe disorganization and distress rather than insight, the neuroscientific basis of a bad trip. The clinical objective is never to induce permanent chaos. The goal is a carefully controlled temporary disruption, just enough force to shatter those pathological mental grooves. Ultimately, the psychedelic compound is doing a very simple job. It only supplies the necessary disorder. It just shakes the snow globe. The real work occurs afterward. Where the brain settles as the snow falls and order naturally returns is where the actual healing lives, which is why clinical integration and therapy are essential. The entropic brain model reframes these conditions. It moves the focus away from the idea of a permanently broken brain and toward a mind that has simply become too rigid to adapt. Sometimes, to find lasting freedom from our own internal patterns, the mind simply needs permission to briefly touch the edge of chaos.